Good morning and welcome back. This is World Talks coming to you live from Warsaw. I'm Salia Strzemska. There's no doubt that Iran and Russia are strategic allies. There are military allies in the conflicts in Syria and Iraq and partners in Afghanistan and post-Soviet Central Asia. The Russian Federation is also the chief supplier of arms and weaponry to Iran. So what is happening on Russia-Iran ties front in the light of the recent changes in the Middle East? How is this alliance impacting the war in Ukraine? To answer these questions, I am joined here this morning by Ellias Aghili Dehnavi, political scientist at Mickiewicz University. Good morning. Delighted to have you with us. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, and the pleasure is mine. Good morning to our dear audience.
So, Russia and Iran have historically enjoyed a pretty close relationship, right? But what changes can we see to that relationship at the moment?
Well, today I want to start a discussion by building on some scientific perspective, because it's possible that my students are also watching this analysis, so it's good for them, to have some scientific foundation to analyze the recent events. From a structural realism perspective, the scientists and the experts know that the international system is being affected by an ordering principle called anarchy. That means there exists no major controlling entity to address and to tackle the problems or the mechanism between the states. In this condition, the states usually strive for surveillance and cooperation and to advance their military and defense capabilities. As we know, the Russians and Iranians, specifically speaking after 2021 and 2022, have been affected by harsh and heavy sanctions from different sides. Not only the Western allies that are putting and imposing sanctions on these two countries, but we are seeing an international coalition. In this state of anarchy and this state of self-surveillance, these two countries balance against the powers that are trying to impose these sanctions and hardship on them. To what extent they advance their alliance depends on the geopolitics of the international system and also the geopolitics of the smaller systems like the Middle East and Central Asia. We have seen that recently the president of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian, and the president of the Russian Federation have signed a treaty that dates back to the previous first urgent treaties ratified in the late 70s. A treaty that has 47 articles and emphasizing and refreshing the ties in different forms and in different fields. This agreement or title deed is very crucial for specific reasons. First reason is regarding the Iranian side, and that is the coming of Donald Trump to the White House within the coming days. So it's really vital for the Iranian side to have some refreshing agreement. And also for the Russian Federation, there are different factors that we can discuss.
Right. So, my question here would be probably, does Iran believe, in the light of what you mentioned, this new treaty, that Russia is a reliable ally? Because, we saw what happened to Armenia during the latest Nagorno-Karabakh flare-up, right? And we also saw what happened with Transnistria, which was allied, right, to Russia, and then was just cut off from gas and sort of with no help, really. So it doesn't seem that Russia is a reliable ally. So what's the point of signing all these deals with them?
Well, from a historical perspective, I can say that the Russian Federation is no good allies for anybody who extend their hand for cooperation. And Iran is not an exception. We can trace the history and see what the Russian government and Russian czars have done to the Iranian people and their territories in the northern part of the country. Yes, that is a history of occupation, if we look at the history. Regarding your very vital question, I should say that the Iranian government most probably knows that the Russians are not good strategic friends. And since they know this fact, they haven't included the defense mechanism agreements into this new comprehensive strategic agreement. Well, it is comprehensive and strategic, but at the same time, it's totally different from the treaties that the Russian Federation have signed and ratified with their North Korean and Belarusian allies. There exists no sign of a joint defense agreement in the newly signed treaty, because the Iranians were very aware of the Russian mechanism and Russian strategies. Article 3 of this newly signed agreement states that these two countries should not support the offensive country that attack the soil and territory of Iran and Russia. In Article 33, we can see that the countries have stated that the governments and related agencies should fight against the fake news, against the international propaganda that is trying to kind of blacken the international face. But still, no sign of joint defense. And by joint defense, I'm referring to this action of direct military hard support. If you attack my territory and integrity, Russian Federation will support me, or Iranian government will support me. No sign of those agreements. And the final point and last point regarding your question is that the Russians are trying to find a good energy market in Iran, specifically when we see the energy embargo that's been imposed on the Russian Federation since their 22 unfair invasion of Ukraine. The Russians have been facing challenges regarding finding new export bazaar. And also the banking system of Russian Federation is also trying to find a bazaar in Iran. VTB, which is one of the second biggest Russian governmental bank, which is headquartered in St. Petersburg, is Andy Kosten, the CEO of the bank, has recently stated that they're trying to open a branch in important cities of Iran, starting from the capital, Tehran.
Right, but I mean, you said that there's no mention of actual direct involvement in military activities. However, it does not include the arms trade, right? Because, I mean, we've all heard of Shahed drones, the famous Iranian drones that are being used in Ukraine. And also Russia has been providing Iran with technology, if I'm not mistaken, right? So this exchange is by all means going on. But my question is about the Middle East. Let's move to the Middle East for a moment. With all these changing dynamics, right? I mean, what happened in Syria with the fall of Assad regime, and of course now the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. You know, this dynamic is constantly changing. So, what role does Iran play here, and how important is this alliance for Russia in the context of what's happening on the ground?
Well, to address your question, I should say that first of all, and from factual evidences, the Iranians have no national interest in Eastern Europe. I mean, technically speaking, this is a matter of external balancing that they're doing with the Russian Federation. I mean, for the sake of balance and for the sake of political and geopolitical surveillance, it's really vital for the Iranians to adhere to a block of power. But officially, they do not recognize and they do not announce this kind of affinity to a specific bloc. So the Iranians indirectly are trying to just be a part of this conflict in order to have some economic gain from selling these drones. And you're absolutely right. There have been no direct mention of military exchange and cooperation between these two countries. But clever enough and smart enough, they have included the R&D and research exchange and the military infrastructure, supports in two countries. So you see, they are very clever. They don't talk about such dimension directly, but indirectly, they are trying to kind of invest in these sectors. And regarding the role that Iran can play in the conflict, to be honest, and also according to the ground facts, they cannot and they don't want to play a prominent role. Actually, they are trying to repair their devastated face in the Eastern Europe and also in the international arena through stating that the Iranian government is not recognizing the occupation of the 4 important provinces in the eastern part of Ukraine. So they are at the same time trying to be really diplomatic, and at the same time they're trying to maintain their balance in the international system, because the condition, the geopolitical and economic condition for the Iranian society and Iranian internal structure is not that much promising. So they have their options, their operational options are too few, and they have to be really cautious.
So what about Russian interests in the Middle East? Because, with the fall of the Assad regime, of course, they lost a major stronghold there, right? And of course, with Iran now being sort of, in a very uncomfortable position, I would say, with their proxies, suffering huge losses. And here, I mean, Hezbollah, right, in Lebanon, of course, Hamas. They still have the Houthis, right? But so how do you see Russian interest in the Middle East changing? I mean, being affected by what's going on?
Well, to answer the question, we have to, first of all, go to Ukraine. The condition for the, Russian army and Russian military infrastructure to advance the war in eastern Ukraine is not that much promising. So the Russians at the moment are trying their best to be concentrated and focused on the war in Ukraine, to see what can they do, to see how can they progress. For this cause, and in order to distract the international community, and specifically speaking, the Western allies, the Russians would welcome any chaos and fuss in the Middle East. Second, they are learning from the changes in Syria, so they won't probably be interested to have another enormous and proportional investment in the Middle East, because they have previously learned from the mechanism in Syria. And third, they might not find any strategic ally like Syria in Middle East. I mean, the Russians and Iranians have historic relation. Almost of the Iranian president have taken a picture in the Kremlin castle. But you see, this is not a strategic cooperation. And by strategic, let me be clear-cut. I'm talking about military direct cooperation. So the third factor that I personally believe the Russians are not trying to invest heavily in the Middle East is that they cannot find any reliable ally to work with. And the last and the fourth option is that they are facing serious problems. I'm talking about the Russians in terms of economy. Any investment and any presence in geopolitical regions of the world require a proportional and enormous amount of economic power. But I believe that the Russians' bank reservoir and financial system is currently experiencing some serious, hardships that stop them from moving forward and opening a new front or even opening a new prominent presence in a region like Middle East.
So just one last question before we go, and I need a brief answer here. Donald Trump is coming into office. What is the worst that could happen to Iran as a result of this?
Well, I can say heavier sanctions and severing the Iranian energy relations with its allies, specifically China, and to a lesser extent India. And most probably more diplomatic pressure. This is really hard to predict, but the condition for the Iranian government and for the Iranian society is really challenging at the moment.
Interesting times ahead. Thank you so much, sir. Ellias Aghili Dehnavi, thank you for being with us this morning. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, and let's hope for a peaceful vote.
And thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.